Looking so dandy and so fine, with his bodyguards and silver cane in every hand.
Good evening and welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm your host, Joshua Solomon, and my co-host, the Honorable J.P. Marzullo, is once again out on another secret mission. There's a lot of communists that he's got to throw back over the state line into Massachusetts where they belong. We'll see him again soon. As always, Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades is sponsored by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, the oldest sports shooting club in New Hampshire, located right here in Manchester at 1732 Lakeshore Road. You can see them online at wilsonhillpistol.org. The club meets once a month for a membership meeting. We have open membership. We do not have a waiting list. It is a private club. You do have to apply to join, but it is an open list. You can come and visit us at any one of our Wednesday night meetings, which is the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Tonight, we have a returning guest, one of my favorite guests, not the Honorable, you're still serving, right?
I'm still a rep.
So the State Representative, Jess Edwards. How you doing tonight, Jess?
I'm doing great. Do I look at you or the camera?
Well, we just
yeah,
chit-chat.
we'll just talk.
Yeah, we'll just talk.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me back, and I appreciate the folks at Wilson Hill making this possible for us to get together and talk. I've been friends with JP. He was probably one of the very first people I met in New Hampshire that were involved in politics. This was probably 12 years ago, and he was a deputy with
He caught your eye because of the bow tie, right?
You know, I don't know what it was. I went out to listen to somebody give a political speech out in Bedford, and he seemed interested and involved, and so I caught him in the parking lot afterwards, and you got my first orientation to, what's what in New Hampshire.
Nice, so. Nice, yep. Yeah, JP's, he's been in New Hampshire for about a little over 25 years, I think now,
yeah.
Right?
And then I had a really great opportunity to work with him for a few years. He was the chair of the Liberty House here in Manchester.
Yep.
And I was on the board with him. And we did that for a few years together. And then we had an opportunity to decide what was in the best interest of the Liberty House, because it was a private entity at the time, and we were, working our tails off to raise funds, but we were still just this little entity. So we made the decision to go ahead. Catholic Charities was interested in picking it up because they sort of had a void in terms of veteran services that they wanted to fill. So ever since then, Catholic Charities has done a really nice job with the Liberty House. They're always fundraising, so if you are looking for Christmas donations, I'd recommend the Liberty House.
Yeah, we try to have the Liberty House on once a year.
Yeah.
At least a representative from Liberty House. So
right.
We're real big fans of the Liberty House here. What I think is great about Liberty House is what it does do for veterans. Right? They obviously can't service everybody, but they do everything they possibly can.
Right.
And they also help you find other services.
Right.
And what's unique about it is that it is and was privately run, right? I mean, it's run, and so there's no government money that goes into.
They refuse federal money because of the constraints that go with it.
And it's because of those constraints, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very unique, and it's unique to New Hampshire. And every time we talk about Liberty House, when we have one of their representatives on, when we have someone like you on, and when I talk to JP, it's like, how do we replicate this elsewhere? Because there are no other Liberty Houses in Massachusetts, Maine, Arizona, California. Like, this is something that has been very effective. It's, veterans who go through this, they get help that they need. They get companionship that they need, camaraderie from folks who have a similar lived experience, and they go through the process of whatever it is that they need, recovery, job training, things like that, and they go through this, and they're successful. Not only are they successful, they come back and they help others. Right. And this is something, like I said, there's a successful formula here. How do we repeat it elsewhere?
Right. So just for clarity, and for people who don't know about the Liberty House, I'd want to say that they are very successful, just as you've said, but that I would point out that they're not perfect. They cast a fairly wide net, and they interview down to the number of people that they can house in their residential facilities, and those folks get pre-screened or qualified around whether or not they seem to be good candidates to put their substance abuse behind them, clean up, and move forward. And if they're willing to put in the work, then to your point, there's all kinds of support there. There's a tremendous number of resources that they pull together, and they help get the folks employed, and they set up a savings account so that a portion of the money that they make while they're staying at the Liberty House goes into their account to help them make their transition out of the house. So it's really a comprehensive program, but a reason why they don't take any federal money is the key string there that says you can't have a zero tolerance thing. I think it was called Housing First or something like that, the rule, which said that even if you get these guys together and one of them starts to bring dope in of some kind, you can't remove him if you're a federally funded program. So it's the proverbial, the federal government insists on allowing the one bad apple to be in this very small cluster of men who are struggling with a range of addictions. And so one of the reasons that the Liberty House is a successful model is with some sort of due process, they're able to just remove at their discretion the folks that aren't going to make it. Like, for example, if somebody violates the one inviolable rule about not introducing drugs or other substances into the community there, then that subjects them to being put out. So overall, I don't know what the percentages are. If they got 70–80% of them through the program, that would be excellent. But they can't get them all because, as everyone I think knows, is that until somebody's really willing to accept personal accountability for themselves and their behaviors, they're not going to make a change. And to your other point about the camaraderie of having veterans who are there, they at least have all been exposed to the military culture, which I think is a very positive culture of personal accountability.
It is very helpful. Anyone who's been through any type of, just simple boot camp type situation where you are forced, trained, however you want to call it, but you are taught to work as a team. You are taught to to work towards a common goal. You
Right.
are, and you're taught to rely on other people and not just be this isolated single entity
Right.
that. And so that, and there's discipline involved in there. And so for a veteran who, served honorably and was honorably discharged, no matter how many times they re-upped, right, how long they served, for someone who has gone through that and lived a life where not only did you go through this training regimen, this very strict training regimen, but you lived that way day in and day out for several years in a workplace environment, right? It's not like going to work, at a fast food joint and being angry at your boss and mouthing off. That does not fly in the military. And so there are certain rules and the structure. It's the structure. And if someone can live under that structure for several years and then fall out of it, they do have that structured training, and that helps.
Muscle memory.
It helps them to fall back into, because some people need that structure.
Yeah. So for people who aren't really familiar with the military, as an outsider looking at it, what I think most people probably assume is that once the person gets into the military, they're in this hierarchical structure that commands and directs and orders them on what they do. And obviously that's a major component, because you can't get a team oriented on a mission unless you have that kind of hierarchy. But of the attributes you mentioned, I would emphasize the importance of the military instilling discipline in the individual. It isn't that the individual needs to be ordered what to do. The individual needs to know kind of what the rules of the road are and what's expected of their behavior, and then it's up to them, if they're going to do well, to be able to exercise the self-discipline to get things done, which is why I think a lot of corporations like to pick people up from the military veterans, because they tend to come in as individuals able to perform their role and to be part of a team with a bigger group of people to accomplish a specific mission. So I didn't know I was going to do this, but I'm putting in a plug for young people and their parents to consider the military as an alternative, particularly for somebody who doesn't want to go into debt. A lot of people going into debt to pay for college degrees that may not have the commercial value that it once did.
We're seeing that as a huge problem nowadays. I mean, the last administration was trying to forgive all of that college debt for folks who can't get jobs. Right?
Well, for everyone. It wasn't just the ones that couldn't.
But I'm generalizing here. Like it was for everyone. But the reason is because people are being sold a bill of goods. If you get a particular degree, you're going to get a job, and that's not happening. That may have happened in the 70s and 80s, but it doesn't happen anymore.
Right. So with my daughters, for example, I tried to encourage them to look at the National Guard or Reserve to pick out some sort of job skill that they were interested in for a lifetime. And because if a person were to do that, they'd go to basic training to learn the fundamentals of being in the military, and then they go on to advanced individual training where they pick up a job skill. And so after they pick up that job skill, that qualification, then they go out into environments in which they get to use that thing. So what I always try to encourage my daughters to do is to take a look at the healthcare professions. For example, if they wanted to become a radiology technologist, then they could go get trained down in San Antonio for almost a year to get all the training and qualifications to do that.
And be paid to do it rather than be paid to do it.
Be paid to do it. And then they would show up in the workforce as somebody who is trained and educated and has a track record of showing individual discipline. And I thought, well, even if you don't want to do this as a career, this is a nice transition from being a child into becoming a self-sufficient adult. And then, you know, once you get that first step under you, you can begin to choose where you really want to go.
There's all kinds of advantages to taking this route, and I agree. We didn't really. We're plugging the military here, but
you need a new sponsor. You need to get the military recruiting people.
But you're absolutely right. If you were to do something like this out of high school and join the military, you get, like you said, that basic structure training. Yeah. Then you get a skill training, and it's across a wide variety of things. I mean, you can go from being a chef, you know, all of the services need people to cook for them, right? To medical, to everything in between, technology. You can pick out a skill and take that career path. You go through a school, and then if you decide you want to stick with it, you can stick with it. If you don't, you have a skill that's workable that you didn't have to pay for. In addition, after 2 or 3 years, or even sooner than that, you may decide that you want to go to O school, right?
Officer school,
and they can,
O school.
They can, you can get your degree through the military, right? You've got the GI Bill, you've got all kinds of options there. You could, and you have this period of time, like you said, where you can become an adult without going into debt, and learn those things, and do something, you know. Me, for instance, I came out of high school, I went straight to Maine Maritime Academy to be an engineer, a mechanical engineer. Marine systems, working on steam and gas turbines on merchant ships. I don't do that. I write software for a living. But I went into debt to learn a skill that I didn't end up using. I mean, I use it nowadays. I mean, I'm the mechanic in the family, But
Plus,
you learn how to think.
That the mechanical troubleshooting is a logical exercise.
It is a perfectly good skill, I mean, and that's what I did. I learned to be an adult. I learned to think. I learned to logic. But it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And a lot of people who are 18 graduating high school don't know. They may think they know what they want to do with the rest of their life, but they don't. And they may figure out through, you know, this exploratory period and get paid to do it.
I'd say it differently. To pick up on your theme that nobody knows what they're going to do. Everyone thinks they've got a plan, and then life starts to happen, and then they have to adapt to the plan or to the reality of their situation, So many years ago, I heard a statistic that said throughout the course of a 40 to 50 year career, most people in America have about 20 transitions from one type of job to another. And
high.
So it's not 20. Let's say it's maybe 10. But the point is, and I've kind of lived this, is that although I was an Army Medical Services Corps person who was trained to perform in a healthcare environment, even in the military, my jobs were never the same from assignment to assignment. You know, I pushed troops in an infantry unit. I went to Korea to be a budget and manpower officer. They sent me to grad school to do computer science and put me in an area where I was a program manager for IT contracts for the Medical Services Corps. And none of those jobs were really, you know, something you would go, okay, I'm going to go A to B to C to D. It was just sort of, you know, where do you want to go for your next juncture? And I felt good about that. My wife really had to put up with a lot because this sort of required movement, and she was the logistics officer of our family command. She would basically be responsible for helping tear down one home and setting up another. But I had heard from a very rich guy at TCU. He gave the money to basically build the business school, and he was invited to our business fraternity to come talk to us. And as you may imagine, all these young 20-something college students, when he was done talking, the guy was standing off by himself. No one was approaching him. I thought, well, that's kind of rude, so I'll just go up and, I'm thinking, well, what am I going to say to this guy who's in his 70s and has all the more money than God because of the success in the oil industry? And I said, well, you have to really be proud of yourself. Look at all the stuff you've accomplished, and you've built this school, helped build this school for future businessmen, and so I'm leading with a compliment, right? And he goes, no, that's all BS. So he said, what I learned is that there are two types of people who go get jobs, and that is those people who are career people and those people who are money people. And he said, I've always been a money person. And so I did whatever it took to make the money. And I have to tell you that here I am, and I'm not really very happy about it. I think I would have been much happier if I'd been a career person and let your interests and desires and aptitudes sort of kind of take you on this random walk through life. And so that kind of stuck with me. I was still in college. I didn't really have a vision for what I was going to do other than I had a ROTC scholarship and I owed some time. But after that, I didn't really have a plan. But just, kind of hearing those words throughout my career, that it's okay to just be a career guy who's worried more about finding the things you enjoy doing and going and doing them instead of just being focused on money. Yeah.
It's an interesting take. I mean, and you're absolutely right. People are happy with themselves, are happier if they enjoy what they do rather than, like you said, chasing money.
Right.
And like I said, I went to school for marine engineering. I write software now, and in between I was a hardware technician. There's a whole bunch of other things. Right. And I mentioned earlier, I got a pilot's license when I was 17 years old, right? Which is the minimum age.
That's pretty great.
I didn't even have a driver's license till I was 19.
Yeah. That sounds like that. There's a girl up north in New Hampshire through the Civil Air Patrol. I met her a couple years ago. I was doing some work with them, and she had a very similar story, but she was younger. She was like 15, and she got her pilot license, and and maybe she had just turned 16, but her thing was she had never actually driven a car.
Right. It was the same with me. So, 16 is the youngest age that you can solo, but you're still a student pilot, so you can't take passengers. You can fly alone. And I did that right after my 16th birthday. And then right after my 17th birthday, I took my test. Right? So you can fly very young. And I never drove a car. At one point as a teenager, I was like, I want to be a pilot. Didn't happen. I'm going to be a marine engineer. Didn't happen, right? Like you said, life takes you into these places and whatever. And the end result here is I have a lot of marketable skills, right? And I love doing those things, and I can talk about a whole bunch of different things. But what really drove me personally, and it started very early on when I was getting engaged to my first wife and starting to have kids. What really drove me was what made me happy was whatever I could do that I enjoyed doing for a living, but could also be home. Right? So
that was a priority.
It was a priority.
To be home every night.
Exactly. So, when my wife was pregnant, the job that I had at that time required me to be gone 3 weeks out of every month. That was my average. It wasn't a requirement, but that was an average. And as we were getting close to, the time for my son to be born, I went to my employers and I said, this has got to stop.
Right.
I said, this can be occasionally, but I cannot not be home full time.
Right.
Right. And so, and they were very agreeable to it. I worked for that company for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. And it was like you said, it was all about what I needed to enjoy what I did,
right.
but it also needed to follow my life path.
Right.
Right. So,
right.
and you don't know that when you graduate high school and go straight to college
right.
for some very expensive degree where somebody's right. promising you, $100,000 a year job the day you graduate college.
Right.
It doesn't
some
happen.
kids wake up in 5th grade or something and go, I need to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. Something inspires them and they go and they knock it out and they become doctors in their 30s. And those kids, I think, are absolutely amazing. But I think I'm a more ordinary sort where I needed to take this random walk in mm-hmm. life. I was married 41 years and I was blessed because she just was so supportive. But I remember in ROTC I did a bunch of adventure training with the Army, and so it made me think I was kind of a stud and I ought to do more stuff in the Army, right? So after we were at Fort Ord, and I was a platoon leader in an infantry battalion, it was a medical platoon though, I came back to her because I'm hanging out with all these infantry guys who imagine themselves to be snake eaters, mm-hmm. and I said to her, sweetheart, I'm thinking about going and getting into Special Forces. She said, oh, I love you. What's that going to take? And I said, well, I'm probably going to have to go away for about a year for training. And she looked at me and she reached out and she touched me and said, oh, I love you. And I'm so happy to be married to you. She said, but had you known that before we got married, I don't know that I would have made the same decision. And that was like the ugliest conversation we'd ever had, was her just gracefully just saying, I don't know that I would have picked that. So I actually didn't go to Special Forces, as it turns out. But I ended up dragging her all over the country, the world actually. We started at Fort Ord, California in Monterey, and it was absolutely an incredible assignment because we were young and in love and no kids.
California, sunshine.
Yeah, the Pacific Coast Highway going through Carmel all the way down the PCH. So I had a motorcycle, we would ride that. And then my next assignment was in Korea, in Seoul, Korea. And she was able to come with me because of the nature of the assignment. And so she stayed busy working for USC on one of their programs while I was doing my stuff. And we got a chance to go travel to the Philippines, and then from there we went to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. So I'm saying those things to kind of just emphasize that what we were talking about earlier is that you don't really know where you're going to end up or how you're going to get there. You just need to have the kind of the support and the courage to pay attention to what your opportunities are and be willing to seek them out and take them, And I think that's a pretty good life lesson.
Yep, it is.
Yeah.
So you retired Lieutenant Colonel.
Yes.
And you actually were deployed to Afghanistan?
Well, that was the most exciting of them. Yeah. I was.
Any post-Veterans Day stories, leadership type stories you want to impart on the world?
I guess I just want to keep talking about how great the military is, even though I had to basically go get some back surgery so I would be physically qualified, and then I volunteered with a New York National Guard unit to deploy with them. Not many people would say how great it was to go to Afghanistan. right?
No, I don't hear that a lot. No.
You're separated from your family. You know, you've got the stress of what's going on all around you. You're in a hostile fire zone, and although as a 05, I was pretty much protected by being on my forward operating base, I still was exposed, you know, through convoys to, and that was the biggest way the Taliban would hit us, was blowing up convoys. But despite all of that, it was an opportunity to go touch a part of the world that matters, and to do it. You know, I had a mixed NATO team that was working for me. We were training the Afghan National Army as individuals to come together to be serving as a unit of a battalion unit, and so the diversity and the languages and the cultures. I had 3,000 people under my supervision at one point. And being responsible for all of that, and working with all these different people in a different situation, doing, you know, kind of different things. I was a hospital administrator. They put me in charge of establishing the first combat arms training unit for Afghan National. So I went from hospital administration to basically being like an infantry grunt, and having those kind of challenges to where you can test yourself and meet other people and build things together. This is a hell of a great experience.
So was that intimidating to you? I mean, by that time you had been in the service for
Right.
a number of years,
Active in reserve,
and now, you know, we're suddenly thrust into this world stage that you know, post 9/11 world stage, and you're in Afghanistan. And had you settled into this mindset that you're a hospital administrator, and then now you've got to suddenly lead people in a direction that you hadn't been trained in or hadn't practiced in decades, right? Like, was that intimidating? Were you like, hey, I don't know if I can pick this up again. I don't know if I can. What was going through?
It wasn't intimidating, because I'm fairly confident and cocky, and I've done a bunch of different things and been able to figure it out and succeed. So it wasn't intimidating. The worst part was the never-ending stress of being accountable for other people where they could get shot at.
Right.
You know, and that's the kind of control thing that you don't really have. And you got to, part of the reason why it wasn't intimidating to me is because nobody else had done it. I was setting up the first one. Nowhere in, I checked back in the military archives, no one had ever done what we were ordered to do, which was to establish an institutional training ground where we could issue them collective equipment like jeeps and crew-served weapons and radios, and teach them how to work as a team, and then use that material to go out. Nobody had ever done it, so it wasn't like I was going to be evaluated against some benchmark. And I had enough different experiences in my career, coincidentally, that when I started to think through the problem, it was like I already had all the puzzle pieces. I just needed to put them together.
And the military gave you those puzzle pieces over the course of your career.
Yeah,
so
I started plus, right? as in an infantry battalion. You know, I was a medical platoon leader, but the mission of the medical platoon was to deploy medics with the combat units, the companies and platoons of the infantry battalion, and then we would go into the field with them and support them tactically. And so I watched them and their training and participated in the training. And so that was kind of the cornerstone from, you know, 30-some years earlier of being a lieutenant, and just happened to be in the right place to get the experience. So all this stuff builds on one another. The whole synergy of these experiences you do in your life, and how if you keep integrating them into your new thought process and your new actions, it can be really very powerful, I think.
No, it's very interesting. When I talk to veterans or active duty, these are some of the smartest, most intelligent, most educated individuals that I ever speak to. Mm-hmm. And it's because of it's constant training. It's not like you get trained and then you do your job for years.
Right.
You are constantly being upgraded on all of your training, and then where you're needed, you're trained in something new.
Right.
And so someone who's career military comes out very educated, very intelligent, and there's an aspect of our society that really looks down on the military and individuals, and think that they're just, well, they were too dumb to go to college, right? They were, and they don't respect the education and the talent that someone has when they come out of the military.
Right.
So there's, it's, you think about Vietnam and the way that those folks were treated when they came home.
Oh, that's horrible.
And then you think about the way that some folks just look down on the military.
Right.
But I don't.
Sure.
It's incredible that that happens. I read a book once. I can't remember the name of the book or the name of the officer, but this officer was the football carrier for President Clinton.
Right.
And he wrote a book. And when the Clintons moved into the White House, a whole bunch of changes took place. And the Clintons had absolutely zero respect for the military. And their staff had none either.
I think Bill probably had some.
I agree, but what I'm going specifically to
the staff,
to Hillary's staff.
Yeah.
Because one of the staff members was basically telling the football carrier, "Well, you need to stand over here. You need to get over here." And he's like, "I don't think so. Right? You don't understand what my job is."
Right.
And he started having conversations with these staff members, and these staff members are treating him like he's a moron.
Right.
And at one point, it came out, where somebody asked him a question, and he said, "Well, I have a PhD in physics."
Right.
And their jaws dropped.
Right.
Like, what do you mean?
Right.
And he explains to them, well, all officers in the military have college degrees.
Yeah, as a basic.
And you've got this White House staff, not just a single person, but an entire staff who looks at everybody in the military like they're morons. Right. And that just, it underscores the treatment that they were given in that world, right? And so I'm just kind of circling back to you, talking about your experience and the training and where you came out at the end. Right. And just like I said, I have great respect for the amount of training and education that folks go through in order to stay on top of it while they're in the military.
So one of the great things about the timing of my career is it mapped into this post-Vietnam hate of the military, and so my first active duty period was under Ronald Reagan, and he was very pro building up the military infrastructure.
We were looking at a 600 ship Navy by the time he left, and what are we down to now?
So you get a leader like that, and they can begin to change the total culture. And so when we went and hired Clinton as our president, people said character didn't matter, and to the observation of the football carrier, it does kind of matter how those people look at the military and how they choose to use them or not use them. Like the Benghazi abandonment is an example, I think, of disregard. But I don't want to go too far down into that that pit of, oh, woe is me. The military isn't looked upon as favorably as they ought to, because this is common in a diverse society like ours, where different groups develop their own narrow perspective.
And they stay in that bubble
and they're
forever.
In a bubble is the right word. I mean,
Yep.
I pay attention randomly to what different celebrities are saying about the policies of the time and what they're talking about. And they all sound the same, to where I think they're all victims of being in the same bubble, you know. And so I think it's common. It's a common practice in society to break down into groups and to kind of try to prioritize your group over others. I think it's natural, but one of the, back to why the military is kind of cool, is there are no bubbles. You know,
There can't be.
You can't be. The whole point is,
Exactly.
you get into a new unit, you become part of that unit. You fit in and you do what you need to do to contribute to the accomplishment of the mission within that unit, right? And so in 2 years, then you change somewhere else, and it's a totally different group of people. And I remember the first day I showed up to basic training at Fort Jackson, and I walk into the barracks, and they're all the bunks are sitting there, and I'm noticing like the four guys, the only four guys up there, and this is not a group of four people I commonly met and interacted with in Bellevue, Nebraska. They were,
Right.
you know, from a different background.
Right.
And so, being a goon, I just went up and started talking to them, and three of them thought I was kind of funny. So I got along great with three of them. But one of them was Ed Hill from Los Angeles, who just, for some reason, decided he just hated me. And so all through basic training, there was always this kind of like, you know, Clark Kent and Lex Luthor thing going on. But I always wonder what happened to Ed. He didn't seem to be a happy guy, but
Maybe he didn't stick around for too many enlistments.
yeah. But the other guys, you know, once we started doing basic training, they were buddies. There was no, you know, I mean, everyone brought their past in, but everyone was together to try to build tomorrow and the day after, you know.
Yeah.
So
Is that building, is that camaraderie is I think it's something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. Right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I went to Maine Maritime. Obviously, it's not a full-on boot camp, but they have their indoctrination summer,
Sure.
your plebe summer,
Sure.
and you know, we had 4 companies of mugs that went through the training, and we went out on we lived together at the you know, in the community, or at the college. We shipped out together on the training vessel, and there were those folks, those little outsider folks who just didn't always fit in and whatnot. But for the most part, once you're through that, there's that camaraderie, and we trust each other with our lives, right? And I keep into touch with several of them today, right? And it's, you know, may not speak for decades, but you get back together and it's like, this is someone I trust, and I trust them with my life because we had that common experience. And that's what veterans are. They have that common experience. And like you said, when you move from one assignment to another after a couple of years, you got a completely different group of people you're working with. But there's an inherent trust there because you know where they came from and they know where you came from.
And you also know what the rules of the road are within the military. You're not supposed to cheat. You're not supposed to lie. You're supposed to show respect. There's sort of a common ways of behaving that you know, the people I think who do well and bond well, they share that that sort of culture. Share the culture. It builds esprit de corps of working together. To your point about how you can run into a veteran anywhere almost, and you have something to interact with. I had a slightly different example of it. I have a little bit of a Facebook presence, And I got a message maybe 18 months ago. And so I opened it up, and it was my platoon sergeant when I was in the medical platoon in the infantry battalion at Fort Ord. That my platoon sergeant found me through Facebook. And we hadn't talked since like 1982, 83.
But you made an impression on him.
You know, and then, so I was going through Fort Worth, and I said, hey, I'm going to go through Fort Worth. You're there. You want to get together for a dinner? And so he and his wife came out to dinner, and we talked. You know, we closed the place down. You know, just talking about our experiences, and so that kind of relationship, long-term relationship, people have it with their best friends. You know, somebody you grew up with, and then you don't see for years, but you're able to immediately get things going again. It was neat to do that with a military guy and hear all his stories, because from there he went off and he ultimately reached the highest rank he could as an enlisted guy, as a command sergeant major. And when he was my platoon sergeant, I didn't, you know, I enjoyed him. I thought he was competent. I never saw in him that he was going to have all that potential to really lead the enlisted corps. So it was really cool just to catch up with him and find out what life had done with him.
Yeah. All right, we have a few minutes left.
Yeah.
Let's talk about being a state rep. Who are you a state rep for?
Yeah.
And what's eating at your craw this term, and what's coming up next term?
Okay, so I'll back up and say I got to the point where my wife let me quit working for money about 7 or 8 years ago, because she knew I always had a passion for public policy, and so, you know, we were with my military retirement and other things, we didn't have to worry about money. So that opened up what I call the volunteer phase of my life. And so being a state rep is a volunteer behavior, I think, because you only get $100 a year.
Right.
So you're not doing it for the money. And I did Boy Scout commissioner, did Civil Air Patrol. I sat on a few boards. I mentioned the Liberty House earlier. So I really sort of took myself out of making money and threw myself into the State House with some other things. And I thought, oh, what a great hobby. Because I like to think about policy, I like to talk about policy, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so great. So what I learned was, after my first term, I knew enough that they moved me from Health and Human Services, where I had a background,
right,
over into Ways and Means, which is the tax policy group. And I'm still sort of enjoying it as a backbencher and just kind of watching the chairman do his thing. And, you know, the bills come in, we talk about the bills go out. And that's what my life was like. And then my third term, I was made the chairman of a finance subcommittee responsible for the Department of Health and Human Services. And the key thing that we did was to develop the budget for Health and Human Services, which is a huge medical operation, right? Or
that's
not
one of the
really
largest
medical
budgets in the state, isn't it?
It's the largest, yeah. It's about 50% of the total state budget.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So, and because of my diverse background in healthcare over the years, I understand what a Department of Health and Human Services is supposed to be. There were a couple areas that I had to learn, like the special needs area, the developmentally disabled. In the military, I'm not working with developmentally disabled people, right?
Right.
So I had to learn some aspects of it. But so for some reason, I was appointed as the chair of that subcommittee, and we were responsible for publishing a budget that we thought would be able to be supported by the House. And then at that point, it goes from an exercise in trying to apply financial analysis to a set of problems and doing the best optimization of scarce resources as you can, goes from sort of a great problem set to politics, right? Because you have mixed perspectives in the House, and I needed half of the people in the House to say, this is sorry. So that'll wake people up. You had to get a majority, right? And so you had to deal with the politics of people who disagreed with you. And the first time around, it was fairly collegial. But then I got my second budget the next term, and then this term I got my third budget, and it seemed like every year it got more and more adversarial, where I started getting death calls. People would say, we know where your daughters live. We know what your address is. It just got to be. So
what period of time was that? Like before COVID, or we're talking?
Oh, after COVID. Yeah,
okay.
COVID, I think, was still going a bit when I did my first budget.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was getting at, because the political landscape over the last 4 years has been very brutal.
Right.
And people would disagree with you back in the early 2000s.
Right.
But now people won't just disagree with you; they will get violent with you, right? They will get.
Certainly, political violence is on the rise, right?
Yeah. So
and we have.
So that's what I was kind of getting at.
Political party leaders that are seem to be encouraging it.
Exactly, party leaders, the mainstream media, they're encouraging this divisiveness. This.
I will point out that I've been really impressed with Senator John Fetterman. Or is his name John?
Yep.
Okay.
It's Fetterman.
So it's Fetterman, but so he's not. He and I would probably disagree on almost every policy issue because of our point of view of what works and what doesn't work.
But disagreeing is not the same as being angry and just.
So I wanted to compliment him there by saying lately he's been a voice saying we got to cut this political violence out. We got to actually do things as a party and as a nation to discourage the political violence. And I thought, given how tough it is to stray away from your party, he's really exercised some leadership. The kind of leadership. One of the nice things about being in the military, you run into hundreds of people and you watch their leadership styles. Who's the good leader, who's not the good leader? And the good leader, I think, is somebody who can understand what is right, and then regardless of the implications, that they're willing to stand up and do something right. So I think Fetterman is just a really great example of that. And I could name Republicans who I think are also great leaders, but
there's fewer of them in the Democrat Party, and they're few and far between. Fetterman is one of them.
Right.
He could be a very good leader for them if they would, get away from their tunnel vision, which is hate Trump, hate Trump, right? And there's been other examples, Lieberman from Connecticut. He was a fairly decent person. You could have a conversation with him without it turning into he said, she said, without it turning into something that's very divisive and people walk away from the table. The idea that someone like Fetterman is willing to come to the table and just have the discussion.
Right.
That's what we need on both sides.
Yeah.
And we've been...
Well, we need that from every leader. Every elected official, whether they appreciate it or not, have effectively been asked to lead their constituents, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of them, I'd take all of them and put them through a basic training so that they could come to at least be exposed to formal leadership training, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a good trend that increasingly more veterans are getting into Congress.
Yeah, we used to have quite a few. It used to be a big thing, and then it came.
It
you're absolutely
dropped
right.
really down.
After World War II, I mean, we had lots of fabulous leaders through there.
But the post-Vietnam, those folks,
exactly.
We crashed out, and we didn't have many. And now I'm happy to see more people. I'd like to see some representation in D.C. from New Hampshire.
We're working on it.
Yeah, and we don't really have any. As long as I'm doing shout outs, though, I'll shout out to Senators Hussein and Shaheen, because after 40 days of doing the wrong thing, they at least figured out that they needed to do the right thing, and they've got us going again on the budget.
That was something that caught my eye too. Was we don't hear a lot in the national news about our Washington delegation.
No.
Right, and we don't hear a lot about them.
They don't do anything, and they don't come back here and tell us what they're doing.
That happened this last weekend, and so I saw Hassan and Shaheen in the headline, and I'm like, uh-oh, here we go.
Right.
And then I opened, okay, so and you read through it, they didn't capitulate totally, right? They didn't like give up their party. They basically said, you know what, this is the only deal on the table.
Right.
And we've got to get through it.
Right.
And so, they kind of did the right thing. On the other hand, and, not to kind of belittle the point, the point you're trying to make. I mean, they did do the right thing.
Yeah.
And,
after 40 days of not.
Being reasonable, but none of the 8 Democrats in Washington, in the Senate, that voted with the Republicans with this final vote, none of them are actually up for re-election, right? They're not in an election cycle. They're either retiring, right? So they're so they're
protected.
They're protected, and I wonder if that was
probably why they were allowed to walk.
That was the out, exactly.
Yeah.
Was the party allowing them to do that? Was I feel like some of it is planned.
A smart party does that.
Yeah.
Right. That's just like if you watch the cycle, our senators go quiet for 4 years after getting elected to a 6-year term, and then they show up talking about how great they are at representing us.
Right.
But so
the hour went by extremely fast, Jess.
This was great. I really appreciate it.
I like that we got the opportunity to talk about Veterans Day and the military, and it is a very good career path for anyone who is unsure of what they're going to do out of high school. You can't lose going into the military and learning a good skill.
Right. Can I put in one plug?
Sure, absolutely.
I just came across this relatively new group in the New Hampshire veterans landscape called Vet Fest. And they had their very first event this past weekend.
Yep, we plugged it last week.
And they had, I went to walk at the Vet Fest around the cubicles. They had probably 30, 40 people showing up with their booths to support this Vet Fest. And so they wanted to check to see if they could get any money put together from this event to do before they do year 2. So if there's anyone with extra Christmas money that they want to donate, this Vet Fest group, they don't really have a website for donors yet.
I think they're the New Hampshire Veterans Resource Alliance or something like that.
That is excellent. Yes,
I think that's the
what
name.
They call.
Yeah.
And they sponsored an event called Vet Fest.
Yes, exactly.
But they were the Veterans Resource Alliance.
Yep.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for correcting me.
All right. Thank you, Jess, for coming on.
It's
Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Maybe another time.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.